Special shout out to today's episode to SeatGeek. We recently partnered with them to become a brand ambassador. What does that mean? Well, for you, it means you get a special discount when you make your first ticket purchase with SeatGeek. With my code InjuredListPod, you will get $20 off your first purchase with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a ticket purchasing app that takes all the confusion out of buying tickets to your favorite sports, concert events, and more. They score each ticket on a scale of 1 to 10 to help you know if you're getting a good deal. Green is good, red is bad. My followers get $20 off their first ticket purchase using my code InjuredListPod. Click on the link in the show notes and browse for your favorite events. Your next big night ever is waiting, and they have the tickets. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Injured List podcast. We have a very special episode with a very special guest to discuss safety in Major League Baseball ballparks. And if you guys recall, about 2 years ago in August, I did an episode where I interviewed Jordan Skopp. And Jordan is the founder of a campaign called Foul Ball Safety Now. And in this campaign, he has been advocating for the installation of safety nets throughout the major and minor league ballparks as a way to protect fans against being maimed or injured by foul balls. And in that interview, he discussed several incidences of fans getting injured, some fatally. And one of the stories he mentioned was that of Linda Goldblum, who was fatally injured from a foul ball at Dodger Stadium back in 2018. And ironically, the day that I released that interview with Jordan was 3 years to the date that Linda had sustained those injuries in 2018. And I recently was able to come in contact with Linda Goldblum's daughter, Jana Brody. And today's episode is with Jana. She is joining us to discuss her book, which she has written, titled Sit Behind the Nets, in a memoir about a mother killed by a foul ball in a Major League Baseball game. And Jana shares the life and story of her mother, as well as her untimely passing, and how she has become an advocate for fan safety at major and minor league ballparks. And so we will be back, and we will be joined by Jana. Her book is on sale. You can find it on Amazon and anywhere you purchase books. There's a QRS code in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen there, which you can scan. That'll take you directly to the link to purchase the book. And the photo that you see in the top left is a photo of Jana's mother, taken by her father the day of the event. This was their normal seats that they had sat in to many Dodger games before, and unfortunately, this was the last game she attended. And Jana is so kind to join us and talk about her mother and her life and some of the circumstances surrounding her injury. Without further ado, we'll be back shortly after a brief word from our sponsors with Jana Brody.
Fantasy Sports Corp and Underdog Fantasy have teamed up to start your fantasy season off in the win column with Best Ball. What is Best Ball? It's quite simply the easiest way to win. No team management, no trades, no waivers. It's their biggest contest ever, and it has only gotten bigger. You simply have to sit and win. You don't even have to set your lineup. Always get your best score every week. Just enter a contest, draft your team, and Underdog will do the rest. What could make this even better? How about free money, up to $100 using our exclusive promo code? Go online now and use the promo code InjuredList to double your deposit up to $100. You tell them Gingerbread sent you. Good girl.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host of the Injured List podcast, Brian Scott.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Injured List podcast our special guest today, Mrs. Jana Brody. Jana, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for inviting me.
It's my pleasure. So this is not one of the typical stories that I tell usually on my podcast. Usually we talk about injured athletes or two former athletes, current athletes, sometimes people in the medical professional. Unfortunately, we have the honor of having you on because your mother was injured fatally, unfortunately, in a Dodger baseball game back in 2018. And it's a tough story to tell, but you've told it well in your new book, which I have up here posted, Sit Behind the Nets. And I think a lot of times what gets lost in the world of sports is that sometimes fans are at risk as well. And I told everybody how in a couple of years ago, I had Jordan Scopp on from Foul Ball Safety Now. And he had spoken to me about your mother's passing as one of the examples that he had given. And so now we're honored to have you on to share the story of your mom from your own words, which you beautifully had written down in your book, which is basically a memoir and a life story of your mother that touches on the whole safety issue with Major League Baseball and netting. Can you take us back to that day, that game when you first found out and the thoughts that were going through your head when you heard that your mother had been injured?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. As you said, it's an issue that is not talked about enough. And so that's why the title of my book says it all. So, I actually had gone out. I remember it clear as a bell. It was my wedding anniversary. It was August 25th. And I went to a party, came home late, still kind of unwinding. And I got a phone call from my sister around midnight. And I thought, this is strange. So she's told me, yeah, Mom got hit by a foul ball at the Dodger game and is now in ICU at the USC hospital nearby. So nearby to Dodger Stadium. I was 2 hours away in Santa Barbara, California. So I was like in complete shock. I'm like, it's like trying to register late at night and a foul ball, and it was just very mysterious. So she said, don't rush down in the middle of the night. There's nothing we can do. She's stable. She's just got out of having brain surgery, and there's, just we'll talk in the morning kind of thing. So I was very befuddled and again in shock. I didn't have very much information. I knew they went to a night game. It was Padres versus Dodgers. And it must have been late in the game. It turns out it was the ninth inning. A Padre had hit a pop fly right behind the net, behind home plate, up in the load section where my parents were sitting. And out of 40,000 people, that ball found my mom. So it was kind of a miraculous night, a lot of details in my book. I talk about kind of, I don't know if it was meant to be or divinely led things, but it was strange. Those tickets that they sit in, they have a block set. So they've been going for years and years and sitting, every 10th game, they go with their best friends, my dad's cronies from UCLA. And that particular night, his wife wasn't feeling good and gave my dad the extra tickets. And he invited my Uncle Mike and my Aunt Eve. So that was a very bizarre situation as well. So I'm sure his best friends would have been there for him and driven his car to the hospital. But to have his best friend by his side while his wife was having brain surgery, again, was one of those very, strange circumstances that just added to the mystery of it all. But
Yeah, looking back there in your book, reading through it, there was a lot of things that kind of later on you're kind of like, I wonder why that happened the way it did and how things kind of worked out. Like you said, both family members were there with them instead of it being a friend. And then, I mean, this is not like your parents had been to many, many games spanning years, like even back to when they were dating. So this isn't like a one-off thing. This was like they've been to many, many games. They were regular fans.
Oh, huge fans.
Yeah.
And again, they all were wearing their Dodger blue, and you can see that on the back of the book. My dad had presence of mind. He actually took a photo that night.
Yes.
They were celebrating their wedding anniversary. That was her birthday month. It was just a celebratory mood that did not end well.
Yeah. And so the cause of death was blunt force trauma, which caused acute intracranial hemorrhaging. Your mom ended up having to have a second procedure, I think, if I'm not mistaken, or was that when you guys decided not to go through with the second procedure because your condition had deteriorated quite a bit over the course of a few days?
Yeah, that's correct. It was brain bleeding, and there was nowhere for the blood to go. It was
Yeah.
just, extensive. And the only procedure that they could offer was, like you said, to open the skull. And that's it. I'm like, well, to let the blood go somewhere. But it didn't help her situation. It wouldn't help her recover or have a
Right.
better life. So that was just something that they could do.
Yeah, and
We're
I
like,
know your dad struggled with that decision. I know you guys as a family did as well. Luckily, I think this is something that's very important that comes out of the book is your mom had a DNR, which working in the medical profession is extremely important. It really does help family and loved ones manage a really terrible situation. So I'm glad that your mother had the foresight to take care of that when the time was when it was needed. And so I'm sure that helped guide you quite a bit in your decision. And
oh gosh, yeah. It was very, very helpful. And like you said, it's like another important message to get that out there, because you do
yeah,
never know. But it was, when they came with this very bizarre scenario, it clearly states in a DNR, as you mentioned, that if it doesn't help your quality of life, no, thank you. And that's it. He was able to show. He had, in fact, after the doctor recommended that, he made me drive him down there once again at like 11 o'clock at night to the hospital and show him. He physically showed her the paper, and she was a woman doctor, and she had said, "This is great. Let's honor her wishes." And there was
yeah,
so the DNR. It was very helpful. It wasn't our decision; it was hers.
right. Yeah, very important thing to take out of the book there. And now, what I didn't understand and what I was unaware of until I read the book was that because of the nature of her injury and the outcome, that she was not allowed to be buried right away, which in Jewish culture, as I know, I grew up in New York, I know a lot of Jewish families and friends. Usually the burial's very quick. They like to do the ceremonies within the first couple of days. But because of your mom's injury, she was not allowed to be taken from the hospital and with the proper burial right away. And I can only imagine what kind of, now to throw this on top of it, because you guys had to wait for her to go get a coroner's report and all this stuff. I had no idea they would even do that stuff for this.
It could be a California law that maybe you're not, that could be the
Yeah,
difference. But it
possible. Yeah.
literally was like a state law. So like we were, like you mentioned, Jewish burials happen very fast to start the whole cycle of the mourning process, and we were at a loss. So we called our rabbis, and we asked them about it, and I mentioned in the book they were very clear, and they said, California federal law or whatever, it goes above the Jewish law. So we have to follow the jurisdiction of California and Los Angeles first. So again, we were on a waiting list. It was like they were trying to rule out any funny business, but it was funny business. It was like, I think that's the reason that I don't really understand, like blunt head injuries. I guess domestic abuse. I don't know what else it could be, but it does have to go to the coroner, and the coroner has to sign off. So
Yeah, interesting.
that it was very crazy. And again, we called every day. Is she moving up the list? If she's moving up the list, and we couldn't plan a funeral. We couldn't plan, we couldn't do anything. We were just so in limbo. I called that, I think I called it funeral limbo. And it literally, there was other things involved, as you mentioned, the Jewish tradition. We also had the high holidays coming up. There was Labor Day in there. It was like all of these things that were going to delay the funeral even more if we didn't get it soon. So it was very crazy. And again, until you have a funeral, you're not really in mourning. So you could officially go to work or send the kids back to school. And so it was strange. It was very a strange time. And I don't know what that was about, but it didn't help the situation at all.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's the last thing you want to have to deal with is, all these confounding factors that are preventing you guys from moving on, grieving, with loved ones, celebrating your mom's life, which, not to take anything away, the book does a great job of really painting a picture of who your mother was. So I do encourage listeners to please pick up a copy. It's for sale on Amazon. You can find it very easily. I'll provide all the links and stuff in the show notes for anyone interested, but it's an homage to your mom. It's a nice memoir. It touches on the baseball stuff and the controversy surrounding your mom's fatality and the stuff, that Major League Baseball has been dealing with for years, but has really turned a blind eye to it and really neglected it quite a bit. In fact, in the weeks and months following your mom's death, they really were silent on the whole matter, correct? I mean, the Dodgers didn't really say anything. MLB said nothing. And I was shocked to read that it was months before anything was even mentioned or spoke of what happened. And it was only because you, as a family, pressured the Dodgers organization and Major League Baseball to make aware your mom's story.
I agree. That was the same question I had. In the beginning we were in mourning, then we were getting over everything, but then as the dust was settling, every time I saw somebody in public, a friend or a family or someone, I had to, hey, how's things going? Not so good. I just lost my mom. Oh, how? And then I'd have to tell the story. She got hit by a foul ball at Dodger Stadium and died from brain injury. And their mouths would just fall open and say, what, are you serious? Then their second thing would, well, what did the Dodgers do for you? How come I didn't hear about this? And I got this response over and over again. And then I started thinking, gee, how come nobody knows about this? How come the Dodgers have done nothing? So I did some research, as I said in the book. I Googled up, deaths by foul ball, injuries by foul ball, whatever I could find. And sure enough, an ESPN article written by Willie Weinbaum popped up. And it was written, I believe, in April of that same year, congratulating MLB for extending the nets to the dugout. And how many people are being, the injuries have gone down. What a fabulous thing. Only one person has died since in 1970. And that was
ironically at Dodger Stadium too.
Yes, that was a young boy, 14 years old, Alan Fish, was hit by Manny Mota. And of course, have you ever heard that story, Brian?
Yes, I think Jordan talked about that story when he was on the podcast, but you can share it if you like.
No, but the point is, I never heard of that guy, So I was probably 14 then too, and I just reached out to this guy, and that's what struck me. Nobody has been killed since 1970. So I wrote him right back, and I said, dear Mr. Weinbaum, how can I get that statistic changed? My mother just died in August, and that's what he wrote me back with the same surprise as you. Wow, how come I'm hearing from this now? I'm in shock. I'm so sorry for your loss. Can we share the story? So that was the snowball effect. Once I agreed to share the story with ESPN, I just got a barrage of reporters from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, everybody calling me, trying to get the story out there as well. So there was a lot of great momentum. There was a lot of, good awareness. Strangely enough, the Los Angeles Times had the smallest article in the back of the paper. So that's probably part of it, that the New York and ESPN was more apt to share the story. And what it did was to make the journalists more aware, make the fans more aware. And then what was happening, unfortunately, nobody put the nets up overnight. Nobody, I always say automobiles recalls, one tiny malfunction and there's one accident, they recall thousands of cars and they fix the cars if one issue happens. This is the second death already, and they're not rushing to fix anything.
And those are mandatory fixes that have to be made. Now, in the case of the Dodgers and the netting and throughout Major League Baseball, those were only recommendations. Those weren't even mandates made by Major League Baseball. It was purely recommendations, and it was up to the individual organizations whether they were going to actually follow through on those recommendations. Yeah. So, not to be conflated here, this was not mandatory. So the fact that they didn't do anything with their netting shows that they could care less, really. I mean, essentially, they didn't care. They took the recommendations and did nothing with it. Yeah, they maybe they extended it down to the dugout, but they certainly didn't raise it. They certainly didn't make it safer, obviously. So, and this, by the way, continues today. But what really struck me too in your mom's case was just the way the Dodgers were just brushing it off. So much so that you guys had to really go out of your way to contact them. And I mean, I'm shocked. You didn't really even ask them for anything in return, just an acknowledgement of the facts of what happened. And even then you were met with significant hurdles to overcome to get anything done. Can you go into that a little bit? I know you wrote about it in the book. You guys met with the Dodgers organization through a mediator. They had you in a big high-rise glass building on the 40th floor for like 5-6 hours trying to figure out a way that they could make this right. And they basically did nothing.
Yeah, it is true that, we were warned or not warned. We were given advice that there's no suits available. You may not sue Major League Baseball. On the back of the ticket, it says, enter at your own risk. Maybe in tiny little writing. And then in bigger writing, it says, buy a Farmer John hot dog. And today it's all e-tickets. So you would probably have to do 3 clicks until you found that warning.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure it's buried somewhere in the back.
Yeah. So it was a crazy, we were just told, and unfortunately, I mentioned this in the book too, that I became a part of an injured fans of major and minor league baseball games on Facebook group. So all this is a home where everybody can vent and share their stories and their heartache and their medical bills, and they could say, there's no, you may not sue. If you do, you can appeal. And then you can lose, and then you could appeal and then lose and appeal. But nobody has any money for their medical bills, so they don't have any money for the suit. So, like you said, we just wanted maybe rest in peace, Linda Goldblum at the scoreboard, or maybe a little plaque on the chair that said, longtime fan, Linda Goldblum, we'll miss you. But nothing with closure. So in the book, again, a strange happenstance. My sister's friend was friends with Alan Fish at 14. He knew of this boy that died. And now, all these years later, this guy is a lawyer. So he decided to take us, to mediation and try to get more awareness and try to at least see the Dodgers face to face and see what they could do. So again, it was, like you mentioned, a horrific experience in a cold shell of a building. They kept the Dodgers in a different room than us, and trying to go back and forth. And obviously, there's no I can't disclose what happened, but
sure.
In the end, the whole point was to meet these people, and we asked our the mediator, can you literally bring those people into our room so we can look them in the eye and they can know that Linda Goldblum was a person, not just a name on a piece of paper, and that this is her husband, who's now a widow of 59 years, and here's the kids and the grandkids. So thankfully we were able to shake their hand and look at them in the eye, but it was still chilly. It
sounds like your description in the book. Yeah, it paints a pretty good picture of how it went down, which is unfortunate.
But the interesting thing is, I was so surprised that they didn't want to spin this into a positive PR.
I know, right?
They could have said, "Oh my God, this is a terrible thing. Let's be the first ones to raise the nets. Let's be
Yeah.
the first ones to extend the net. We want to have a safe park." But that was not the case.
I honestly
And
don't understand that either.
I don't either. So because of my story got such publicity, now when the foul balls were hitting people and hitting children, and they were catching it on the film, the cameraman was catching it, the players were watching it with their own eyes. Albert Amora fell to his knees. He saw it happen. And then it was those parks that said, "Oh, this is so awkward. We better put the nets up. We don't want any children being hurt." But again, it wasn't the Dodgers, it was the other stadiums that started because there was no specific mandate. It
Yeah.
was just crazy and
And now,
heartbreaking.
yeah, I mean, it truly is. It's not what anyone would expect going to a professional Major League Baseball game. You go there like your parents did to celebrate with family or friends, like special occasions, and becomes part of your life, right? I mean, you said you were going to Dodgers games when you were a young kid, and I can
Oh,
vividly remember going to New York Mets games when I was a kid and taking my son. And nobody
yeah.
wants to be feared for their safety. And I've been
And
throughout baseball, and it's still a lack of netting, and there's still a big safety issue, even around the plate and near the dugouts. So it's still not really been fully addressed. Are you still working towards getting this changed? Are you actively involved in anything right now?
Well, I am happy to say that Dodger Stadium has extended it all the way to the foul poles, and they have extended that back netting higher to cover where my parents' seats were in the lounge. So in my particular case, I'm thankful that Dodger Stadium, that was pretty much my goal, did something to prevent it at their stadium. And again, we've been advocating for all the stadiums to do it. And again, I'm not a statistician, but a lot of the parks have done fabulous and they've gotten this far. Strange thing is that just a few months ago, they did say a mandate that the commissioner mandated the minor league parks to raise their nets or extend their nets. However, they gave them to 2025. So I'm like, you're going to have 2 more years of injuries? That makes no sense at all.
I mean, it's got to be like pocket change for these organizations to spend the money on putting up netting. I mean, how much could it possibly cost them?
Well, Jordan Scott did the research, and he said it costs like $50,000 in 3 days.
And that's like a drop in the hat for them.
That is the most silliest thing I've ever heard. So again, I don't understand the delays. I don't understand why, and even the minor league parks and we're talking spring training. Those are even smaller. They go smaller and smaller as you go. And, a lot of the people in my injured fan group got hurt at spring trainings. So that's huge. I recently was doing this is kind of a fun story. Just again, the title of my book says "Sit Behind the Nets." Look on the inventory and purchase your ticket behind the nets, because even if they're not extended all the way, you can still find one. So I was going to a book club and I was sharing my book to 20 people that I've never met before. And in that group, one woman had been hit twice at a college game and a minor league game. So it was crazy that the numbers of people that get hit and hurt. And our local high school, they're right here on the corner that my 3 kids went to, they recently installed nets because the foul balls were going into the swimming pool. So there's just a necessity for it. And again, you can, just get a ticket and sit behind the nets is my message.
Yeah, Jordan and I had talked when he was on the podcast a couple of years ago, and one of the things we were enamored by was the Japanese baseball league and what an amazing job they've done going all out for fan safety in not just the netting, but they provide gloves to people, hard hats, like helmets to people sitting close to the netting, and really go out of their way to make it a safety, safe experience while you're at a ball game. So
yeah, well, I don't know if you got that far in my book, but I've been to Osaka twice. I've been to
yes,
Hanshin.
right.
I've been to Hanshin Stadium 2 different times, like 30 years apart. And it's the most miraculous thing. Like you said, there's a danger. They call it the adventurous section. So if you want to
Yes.
be an adventurous section with no netting, they do give you a helmet and a glove and all that. If you're in the other section, there's netting 360 degrees going around. I mentioned in the book that even during the Olympics, because of COVID, there was hardly any people there. They still had whistleblowers and people alerting you if a ball
Forgot
was
about that part.
coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're very conscious. They're serious baseball fans,
Yes.
but they take their safety seriously. So it's really heartbreaking.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I forgot about that part, because your father, and this is why I love these stories, because there's always some type of connection or some type of it's like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? You can always kind of go back to these weird kind of connections with people have and relationships. Your father was a wrestling coach and developed a relationship with another wrestling coach from Japan, who basically you guys became very close family friends with, and you would share your house with them when they would come to the United States and vice versa. So that was, I'm assuming that's when you experienced your Japanese ballparks, was when you were visiting with them.
Exactly. Yeah. It was like, it was so, and then 30 years later, I went with I went when I was 19, and then all these years later, my daughter was 19. So we went back and she got to experience the game.
It's very cool.
Yeah. And it was literally it was 1 year since my mom's passing. It was the following August.
Awesome.
We again, in Judaism, you mourn for a year, you put it behind you, and you get on with your life. And we took this trip. She was going abroad, and we had an opportunity. And yeah, again, big baseball fans, and we had a ball.
It's a cool story. Amongst many that you put in your book about your mom and your experiences. What was the word that they called her? Was that a Jewish term that they used for grandmother that they called her?
Yes, a Jewish grandma in Yiddish is a bubby. So my mom is a bubby, and she said, "Oh, anybody could be a grandma, but it takes somebody special to be a bubby."
Well,
and
it's very cool.
It is
very endearing nickname. I love it.
Yeah, it's a Yiddish word. There's lots of bubbies out there. But yeah, that's the thing. I was trying to paint the picture. My mom was an average grandma, a very fun lady, but average American housewife who had an ordinary life and a very extraordinary death. So I'm thrilled to keep her name out there. And again, even when all the other issues were happening, when the other people were getting injured, they always wrote an article and would say this child or this person got injured, but guess what? Linda Goldblum died in August of 2018. So I feel like her name and her energy, it was helping to move things forward. And that was another impetus for writing the book, because I was inundated with all the newspaper reporters and all that right off the bat, and I never really took the time to go through the details and really mourn it properly. So a year, 2 years after her death in 2020 into COVID, that's when I decided to write the book. And it, talk about healing, and, it was very helpful to go through all that and just to get it down. And again, to set the story straight and share I call it a memoir with a message. So even if you don't read the book and you just read the title, I always say sit behind the nets. In fact, I was encouraged to change the title. And I held strong. I said, no, I'm sticking with it. So again,
it's a good title. It's a great book. I definitely enjoyed reading it. I didn't get through the whole thing, I will admit, but I got through the good parts, which is most of it. So I do appreciate it. And your mom sounded like a wonderful woman, and in her passing, she's doing great things, because I'm sure she sparked some change, if not at Dodger Stadium, then at least throughout the rest of Major League Baseball. So it's glad to hear that there are some good things coming on the horizon here. Hopefully it happens before any other catastrophic injuries occur. And it's a great story with an unfortunate kind of twist, but hopefully a happy ending. And I think you guys should be proud, and I know you are. And I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your mom's story and allowing us to interview you and talk about it more personally. And I strongly want to recommend everybody go check out the book. It's called Sit Behind the Nets. I will have all the information in the show notes, all the links to Jana's pages and all of the stuff where you can purchase her book. And if you want to get in touch with Jana, I'll have her website up there too. Jana, is there anything you'd like to say before we kind of dip out here about your mom or about anything with the book or anything else?
Yeah, again, Ryan, I really just thank you for taking the time. Again, it kind of falls into your genre about the injured list. I think this is a great podcast and you cover a lot of kind of things. And this was a great avenue for me to be able to share it. And again, support your favorite team, support your favorite player. But if you're going to go to the game, buy a ticket and sit behind the nets. That's my most important memoir with a message.
Couldn't agree more. It's a great way to watch the game. You don't even know they're there half the time.
Exactly.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you, Jana, for joining us.